So this is the iPhone XS, Apple's flagship phone of 2018, and for a pretty long time, this has been one of my favorite iPhones Apple have ever made. It just seems to be, at least on the surface, a much more refined version of the previous iPhone X, which I was already a big fan of, but seeing as the design is kind of showing its age a little bit now, should you still consider this thing in 2021? Let's find out. First off, we have the specs. In terms of processing power, the iPhone XS has that A12 Bionic processor, 4GB of RAM, which is a nice amount, and a variable amount of storage with 64, 256, and 512GB. I personally do have the 64GB version, as I never even fill up half of that, so me buying more would kind of be a little bit pointless. But if you are a big mobile gamer, then it is nice to know that you can get some more storage if you want more local files. In terms of color options, you do get a few choices with space gray, silver, and my personal favorite, gold. It's a nice mixture of the previous gold and rose gold, and personally, I think this thing looks amazing. It's honestly hard to describe it. You really have to see it for yourself, but man, this thing looks amazing. Finally, the iPhone XS weighs in at 177 grams, which, while not the lightest, is far from heavy, and I've personally never had any problem using it. My hand never gets tired, so yeah, that's good. Your phone doesn't make your hand tired. Apart from the battery life and the screen section, because they'll get their own segments later, that's it in terms of specs. Not really much else to go over. We're going to be talking about how these work in terms of performance later on, but up next, we have the design and build quality. The iPhone XS uses this nice blend of glass and stainless steel like most high-end iPhones, and as expected, this thing feels kind of amazing in your hand. I also love how the bezel looks for these higher-end models. The polished steel really does just take the look of the iPhone XS up a notch. This phone also features an IP68 water resistance rating, which will protect your phone in up to 2 meters of water for 30 minutes, and I actually think this is a pretty useful addition, because if you forget to take your phone out your pocket when you jump in the pool, for example, but this should be used carefully. Please don't go scuba diving with your phone in your pocket. It probably won't end well. Going back to materials, while I have historically found iPhone glass to be much more durable than it used to be, going back to the days of the iPhone 5, due to the nature of glass being glass, I would still recommend a case for this thing. In fact, I pretty much always use one. So yeah, nice design, decent build quality, but a case is definitely a good idea if you have a tendency of dropping your phone like I do. I'm going to adjust my mic, sorry about this. Anyway, moving on, we have the screen. The iPhone XS is a part of the original notched line of iPhones, so it features a 5.8-inch OLED screen with a resolution of 1125 by 2436 with a PPI of 458. Personally, as that's how I like to conduct all my reviews, I am still a sucker for this line of screens. I love the form factor of a 5.8-inch screen, and if you need bigger, you can always go for the XS Max. The OLED technology still works a treat, and it's bright enough to the point where I never find myself wanting more, even in the brightest of environments. It also features True Tone, which has been one of my favorite technologies over on Apple screens for a while now, and while I personally don't use it on my MacBook Pro as it really isn't ideal for color grading, on pretty much every other Apple device I own though, I like to keep it on. It keeps colors balanced in all lighting conditions, which is pretty useful. It also features 3D touch as the secondary interaction method, and I've kind of finally accepted the death of this technology. I actually think I'm starting to prefer haptic touch. I don't know. That said, it is still a very cool technology, which I would have preferred to see refined rather than ditched, and it's pretty much as good as it gets here. So if, like me, you are a sucker for this technology, the iPhone XS is a pretty good option. Following this, we have the button layout. The iPhone XS is obviously one of the original iterations of the notched iPhone, so it features the same button layout as the iPhone X, XR, and the 11 series. We get separate volume up and down buttons, a nice big isolated lock button on the right side, and the ever useful mute switch. While I personally do prefer the tactility of the aluminium bezel iPhones, this is still a pretty excellent button layout. Everything just makes sense, and when I initially made the switch, I found that I got used to it very quickly. Next up, again, as this is a notched iPhone, the biometrics unlock method for the iPhone XS is Face ID, and on release, this was a pretty drastic upgrade from the original 10. It was faster, it was more accurate, and while this was more or less bridged with software updates, this is still an excellent Face ID system. It's accurate, it's snappy, it works in all lighting conditions, and while you don't get as much variety with the angles like you would on the iPhone 11 series and later, this is still a pretty excellent face unlock system for 2021. Following on, we have one of my favorite things about the smartphone experience: the camera. The iPhone XS features a dual camera system like is common on notched iPhones, and here we have a standard 12 megapixel f1.8 lens as well as a 12 megapixel f2.4 telephoto lens, which I always love. Oh, and of course we get the 7 megapixel f2.2 front-facing camera. But how does it actually perform? In terms of photo performance, while it may not look like much has changed from the iPhone X, the additional dynamic range is pretty noticeable in photos. You can get more sky in your landscape shots, more shadow detail in your low light shots, as well as some nice levels of sharpness and saturation. Both lenses do perform very well on this phone, and the telephoto lens can add either some nice extra reach or just a different level of lens compression. That's a fun one. If you don't know what that is, I would strongly recommend looking that one up. In terms of portrait mode, significant improvements were made here too, as you can now customize the amount of background blur you get in your photos, and while you still, at least on the XS, can only get portrait mode on the telephoto lens, it's still definitely a nice upgrade. The front-facing camera, again, performs pretty nicely here. It got some of that better dynamic range, so it should be more than good enough for some selfies. Right, so photos are good. But what about video? Well, the iPhone XS shoots 4K at up to 60 FPS, and I've actually found this to look pretty decent. But as always, here's some footage if you want to judge for yourself. I often use iPhone footage for some quick behind-the-scenes shots, as I did shooting the behind-the-scenes section of this video, which you can find over on my Patreon. The iPhone XS also shoots slow motion in 1080p at up to 240 FPS, which doesn't look brilliant to be honest. However, if you just want to shoot some fun slow motion, it should certainly be good enough. And if you need some more quality, you can always switch to 120 FPS, which I've always found to be slightly better quality. The front-facing camera also shoots in 1080p at up to 60 FPS, and while this certainly doesn't look as good as the main camera, it's again fine for some casual vlogging action. Overall, while some aspects of this camera system are definitely a little bit dated nowadays, for example, the lack of any technologies like night mode or the lack of an ultra-wide camera, I still very much enjoy using it. And if you just like to take some nice photos for fun and you aren't a mobile camera enthusiast, then the iPhone XS should definitely get the job done. After this, we have another important segment, the OS and app performance. Seeing as the iPhone XS was released in 2018 and iPhones typically have a pretty long support cycle. In fact, another S-series iPhone, specifically the 6S, just got 7 years of support, which is, kind of crazy. All this considered, the XS isn't going anywhere anytime soon. I have been using this thing with iOS 15 and it's performed absolutely great. Scrolling through the OS, performing system functions and interacting with stock apps has all been flawless on the XS. And honestly, I couldn't really wish for anything much more. In terms of more intensive performance, that's also been really good. Watching 4K videos has been a great experience, partially due to the screen, but the phone has kept up with that nice display very well. And gaming, while I personally don't play that many games on my phone, has also been very good. Overall, the current performance of the XS is actually pretty remarkable, and with the support that iPhones typically get, it should stay this way for a while. Quickly, going back to the hardware, we have the speakers. The iPhone XS features that stereo technology that was introduced on the iPhone 7, which uses both the top and bottom speaker in conjunction to create a wider, louder sound, and I've always found this, so long as it's balanced well, to be a really nice addition to the built-in speakers, just to make it that little bit more immersive. I constantly use this to casually listen to music when I'm just doing basic tasks that don't really require flawless audio quality, but would still be nice with some music. And for that, the iPhone XS gets loud enough, is good enough quality, and has never really left me wanting more. Finally, we have the battery life. The iPhone XS has a battery capacity of 2,658 milliamp hours, and while it's not the largest by any means, in fact, it's actually slightly smaller than the max battery capacity of the iPhone X. However, due to the more efficient processor, it actually does perform better in my experience. Now, seeing as you can mostly only buy this phone used now, or Apple refurbished if you're lucky, this can vastly vary based on your battery health. My personal XS does almost always get me through the day just last fine. However, I do occasionally need to plug it in during the evening, especially on heavier days. So yeah, if you plan on using your phone a lot and you don't want it to run out ever, I would strongly suggest making sure that you get a good battery. Okay, so to summarize this phone, what do I think of it and who do I think should buy it? Well, if you want a notched iPhone that's going to last for a good amount of time, you don't want to get the iPhone 11 and you don't want to break the bank, then the iPhone XS does seem to be a pretty great option. I personally find this phone a pleasure to use and would happily use this as my only phone. So if the XS sounds like a good fit to you based on the stuff you've heard in this video, then maybe consider checking this one out. Alright guys, so that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Let me know, by the way, what do you think of the iPhone XS? Do you have one? Do you plan to get one? Feel free to let me know in the comments. I always enjoy reading those. Once again, a huge thank you to my patrons for helping to support this channel. If you want to get bonus videos like the behind the scenes of this one, or some wallpaper packs every month and much more, then feel free to check that out. As for now though, as always, thank you for watching. Remember to like the video if you want to see more content like this, then smash that subscribe button. I'm done for now, and I will see you guys in the next one.